Most people believe success comes from support, friends who encourage you, mentors who guide you, family who believes in you. But history hides a darker truth. Some of the most powerful individuals who ever lived succeeded without support, and often in spite of everyone around them. In fact, Niccolo Machiavelli once implied something deeply uncomfortable. The moment you stop expecting support is the moment you become truly dangerous. Because support creates comfort, and comfort creates weakness. But when you stand completely alone, something very different happens inside the human mind. Something ancient, something ruthless. And if you understand it, you will realize that having no support may be the greatest advantage a person can have. Imagine two people beginning the same journey. The first has encouragement everywhere. Friends cheer them on. Family reassures them. Mentors promise guidance. Every step forward is softened by praise. Now imagine the second person. No one believes in them. Friends disappear. Family doubts them. Colleagues quietly expect them to fail. Every step forward feels like walking through cold wind. Most people assume the first person has the advantage. But Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people never notice. Support creates dependence. When people support you, a hidden contract forms. You begin to care about their approval. You adjust your decisions to avoid disappointing them. Slowly, your path is no longer fully your own. You begin asking invisible questions. Will they agree with this? Will they still respect me? What if I fail and embarrass them? And without realizing it, your ambition becomes negotiated, diluted, safe. But the person with zero support lives in a different psychological reality. There is no audience to impress. No expectations to protect, no reputation to maintain. Only one thing remains: pure survival. And survival activates a part of the human mind that is far more powerful than motivation. It activates adaptation. When no one supports you, the brain begins to change. You stop waiting for validation. You stop explaining your plans. You stop asking permission. You begin observing instead. You study people quietly. You watch how influence works. You learn who pretends to help and who quietly blocks your path. This is why Machiavelli believed loneliness sharpens perception. Because when you cannot rely on others, you begin relying on something far more dangerous: your own judgment. And this creates a psychological transformation. At first, isolation feels painful. Humans evolved to seek belonging. Being unsupported triggers something primal: rejection, doubt, even fear. But if you survive that stage, something extraordinary happens. You become independent of emotional approval. And the moment that happens, most social pressures lose their power over you. You stop fearing disagreement. You stop fearing criticism. You stop fearing being misunderstood. And suddenly, you can make decisions that others are too afraid to make. This is why many successful figures throughout history followed the same silent path. They were doubted, ignored, sometimes even ridiculed. But those conditions forced them into a mindset most people never reach: a mindset where approval no longer controls behavior. And once a person reaches that stage, they become extremely difficult to manipulate. But here is the darker truth Machiavelli understood. Having zero support does not only change your strength, it also changes how you see people. Because when you build something alone, you begin to notice a disturbing pattern. The people who ignored you at the beginning often appear again the moment you start to succeed, smiling, congratulating you, claiming they always believed in you. And that is the moment many people make a critical mistake. Because Machiavelli warned that the most dangerous moment in success is when the people who abandoned you suddenly return. And if you don't understand the psychology behind that moment, you may unknowingly destroy everything you built alone. Success attracts people, but not all of them arrive for the same reason. Machiavelli observed something about human nature that most people only discover too late. People respect strength, but they approach it for very different purposes. Some come because they genuinely admire what you built, but many come for another reason entirely: opportunity. When you were struggling alone, there was nothing to gain from standing beside you. No reputation boost, no shared victory, no reward. Supporting you then would have been a risk, and most people avoid risk unless success is already visible. But the moment your progress becomes undeniable, the psychology of the crowd changes. Suddenly, your story becomes attractive. People want proximity to power, to momentum, to the feeling of being connected to something rising. So they return. Not as enemies, not even as critics, but as supporters who claim they were always on your side. And this creates a dangerous illusion. Because human beings are wired for belonging, after long periods of isolation, the mind becomes hungry for connection again. You want to believe them. You want to feel that the struggle was finally recognized. But Machiavelli warned that the crowd that ignored your rise can easily become the crowd that controls it, because influence rarely arrives openly. It arrives through subtle shifts, suggestions, friendly advice, concern. You should slow down. You should be careful. Maybe you should do it this way instead. None of these ideas sound threatening. In fact, they sound supportive. But slowly, almost invisibly, something begins to happen. The independence that made you powerful starts to soften. Your decisions become conversations. Your instincts become debates. Your path becomes negotiated again. And this is how many people unknowingly lose the very advantage that allowed them to succeed. They forget the lesson that solitude taught them, that the most powerful position in any hierarchy is not popularity. It is psychological independence. Machiavelli understood that people who rise alone develop a rare trait. They are not easily steered. They do not panic when approval disappears. They do not collapse when criticism appears. They already survived that environment, which means they are free to act strategically instead of emotionally. And this freedom creates a form of power most people never achieve. Because the majority of human behavior is controlled by one simple fear: the fear of social rejection. People stay silent to avoid it. They compromise to avoid it. They abandon their ambitions to avoid it. But the person who already faced rejection and continued moving forward anyway becomes immune to that pressure. And immunity to pressure is the foundation of real influence. That is why Machiavelli often emphasized a difficult principle. Those who seek universal approval rarely achieve lasting power, because pleasing everyone requires constant compromise. But the person who learned to walk alone no longer fears losing approval. They already know something important. Support is pleasant, but it is not necessary. And once you truly understand that, you stop waiting for permission to pursue what you want. You stop measuring your direction by the reactions of others. You begin moving with quiet certainty. And ironically, that certainty often attracts more followers than any attempt to impress people ever could. Because humans instinctively trust individuals who appear self-directed. People who are not constantly checking the room for validation. But there is one final truth hidden inside this idea. Success without support is not easy. The isolation is real. The doubts are real. The silence from others can feel heavy. But if you endure it long enough, you discover something most people never realize. The absence of support forces you to build something far more reliable. Your own internal authority. And once a person learns to trust that voice, they no longer need the crowd to move forward, which means they can pursue goals others would never dare to attempt. And in a world where most people are controlled by approval, the person who no longer needs it becomes extremely difficult to stop.